And the book that I'm just almost finished with, and now I'm blanking on the author's name, it's called Sugar in the Blood. Andrea Stuart. Fortunately, I had the book right behind me, Sugar in the Blood. I'm actually finding that really inspirational just in thinking about my own writing. And I mean, I found both books inspirational in terms of my own writing and what do I want to do with my writing. But Mohammad El-Kurd's book is very small and short. This book, Sugar in the Blood, is huge. But she tries to tell the whole history of the island of Barbados by tracing back her ancestors' story. And just really, she goes all the way back to the 1600s with the first British immigrant to Barbados. And so she uses the really fragmentary documentation of these people's lives going down through the generations to, in the 1700s, the descendant of this original immigrant who had relationships which she, tries to untangle with at least 4 of the women who he enslaved on the plantation, as well as being married to a white woman. And the author is the great-great-granddaughter of one of those liaisons with one of the enslaved women. So she tells the whole history of slavery and Barbados and the global economy through these individuals that she has identified as her ancestors. And it's just a really fascinating, so, she'll say, I have no way of knowing what this woman experienced in this situation, but there's slave narratives by other women in this situation that talk about it. And so this is what they experienced. So, I just love the way she works as a historian. Actually, in reading this book, Sugar in the Blood, she quotes the Barbados 1688 Slave Code, an act for the governing of Negroes. And when I read this, it was like, wow, that's exactly how people talk about Palestinians in the media and in, our elected officials. So I had this slideshow. I'm not going to show you the slideshow, but I'll just read you what she says. She quotes the Barbados Act, 1688. It says, "Negroes are of a barbarous, wild, and savage nature, and such as renders them wholly unqualified to be governed by the laws, customs, and practices of our nation. It is therefore becoming absolutely necessary that such other constitutions, laws, and orders should be framed and enacted for the good regulating and ordering of them, as may both restrain the disorders, rapines, and inhumanities to which they are naturally prone and inclined." And when I read that, I thought, wow, that's like Israel talking about the Palestinians. They're just so naturally terroristic and dangerous. We have to govern them by other laws, and then we have to justify, like, they can't have the rights that we have, so we have to maintain this harsh military rule and harsh punishment because they're so naturally dangerous. And that Israeli narrative towards Palestinians and the dual legal system is really echoed in the United States. And it's also echoed in the United States, not only in our long settler colonial history, because it is echoed in our long settler colonial history. And in fact, the first Virginia Slave Code was modeled on the Barbados Slave Code. So these ideologies are really deeply embedded in our country's history. But, in theory, today, supposedly everybody has equal rights and we don't have separate sets of laws for different people. But the narrative about immigrants is exactly the same, and especially what we're hearing from Trump. But in some ways, Trump is just echoing some of the criminalization narrative that we heard from Obama and Biden, who supposedly were not as anti-immigrant as Trump. But this idea that immigrants are somehow these dangerous criminals, and so we have to have other laws to regulate them. And the laws that we have for ourselves, like, we're all good people, so we have, like, really laws that protect protect us. But these dangerous, barbarous people, we have to have separate laws for them to protect ourselves from them. And, you know, I absolutely see that practically every time Trump opens his mouth and talks about, you know, the foreign invasion and the threats to U.S. foreign policy and, you know, the revoking of the student visas. And, you know, it's also just interesting how much of the anti-immigrant narrative and how many of the people who are being deported now is for pro-Palestinian activism. You know, Biden always used to say, and he's not the only one, he was quoting Netanyahu, but like every US politician has said this, you know, Israel is in a really dangerous neighborhood. Well, what does that mean? That it's basically the Barbados Slave Code all over again, like all these dangerous people. Of course, Israel has to be murdering people all the time because it's in a dangerous neighborhood. And, you know, for Trump, the whole world is a dangerous neighborhood. And so we have to constantly be sort of adjusting the laws, you know, this idea that, well, of course, immigrants don't have rights in the United States. Like we normalize that immigrants shouldn't have rights. With some of the same kind of rationale that people can't all live under the same laws because some people are just like inherently more dangerous than others.